Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome back, all brothers and sisters, disciples and disciples, lovers of the Sunnah and its sciences, to another episode of Hadith Disciple Critical Book Review. Hadith, its literary style by Dr. Khalid Mahmoud Sheikh. Hadith and its literary style by Dr. Khalid Mahmoud Sheikh. That's the book that I've chosen. I've selected and picked for myself and for you guys, bidnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. In general, the book is good. It's informative, it's beneficial, it's something that won't hurt you to have in your library, and bidnillahi ta'ala, it will help you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. The book has been printed and published by Adam Publishers and Distributors in New Delhi, India. This edition is from 2006. And it was printed, bound in India, and published by S. Sajid Ali for Adam Publishers and Distributors, also in New Delhi. The book is approximately 158 pages. 158 pages. On the excerpt, the back of the book, it says about the book. This book is in fact a small treatise comprising two portions. One deals with hadith style. The treatment of the style shows how carefully, diligently, and honestly this treasure has been preserved by the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and then passed down from generation to generation. Then it speaks on the author. Dr. Khalid Mahmoud Sheikh obtained his MA in English and MA in Arabic from the University of Punjab. He got TEFL from Sydney, Australia in 1983 and PhD from PU Lahore in 1985. He taught Quranic and Hadith science almost a decade at Dawah Academy, International Islamic University of Islamabad. He has also delivered a series of lectures on Quran and Hadith science during his official visits to Australia, Europe, and North America in 1983, 1991, and 1992 respectively. He is presently Professor/Director, Institute of Islamic Studies, University of Kashmir, Pakistan, Mirpur. And then it says authors, other books. A Study of Hadith, Chicago, USA, 1992. And alhamdulillah, we have a copy of that. And we have studied it and researched it. And perhaps we'll publish that soon. A Study of Quran and its Teaching, Chicago, USA, 1998. Al-Khilafat al-Islamiyya, Islamabad, Pakistan, 1992. Muslim Minorities in the Soviet Union, translation in Arabic by the author, Cairo. Islam in Modern Age, Islamabad, 1999. Dawah in Modern Times, Adam Publishers, India, 2006. Hadith and its literary style, obviously the book that we're dealing with today, which is Adam Publishers, India, 2006. So we have the dedication to my teachers from Al-Azhar, at whose feet I sat and learnt Arabic language and Hadith for 1 decade. Also to my teacher, late Sheikh Mahmoud Ahmed, a renowned scholar and economist who stimulated and encouraged me to work on this project. Then we have the contents. Part 1, Preface. Chapter 1, Hadith, Meaning, Concept, and Classification. Chapter 2, The Authenticity of Hadith, Recording, Preservation, Compilation, and Codification. Chapter 3, Legal Status of Hadith and Sunnah. Chapter 4, Fabrication of Hadith. Chapter 5, Principles of Hadith Criticism. Chapter 6, Kinds of Hadith Collections. Chapter 7, Major Works of Hadith and their compilers. Part 2, Chapter 8, The Impact of Quranic Ideas and Style on Hadith. Chapter 9, The Style of Hadith Varies from Situation to Situation. Chapter 10, The Use of Similitudes and Parables in Hadith. Chapter 11, The Pithy and Expressive Style of Hadith. Chapter 12, The Intellectual and Emotional Elements in the Style. Chapter 12 is the last chapter. Appendix A, Islamic Invocations. Appendix B, Transliteration Chart. Appendix C, Glossary of Terms and Biographical Notes. And Appendix D is the bibliography. Then the author, he mentions the preface. He says, this small treatise on Hadith comprises 2 portions. One deals with Hadith sciences and the other treats the Hadith style. Originally, it was intended to analyze the style only. Later on, it was felt that if the reader embarks upon the study of Hadith style, the author, he says, later on, it was felt that if the reader embarks upon the study of Hadith style without having any knowledge of Hadith sciences, he would not be able to comprehend and appreciate the delicacies of style and its charms. This is why a few chapters on hadith sciences have been added in the beginning of the book to make the reader conversant with hadith sciences, i.e. hadith, its meaning and concept, its classification, significance, and authenticity, etc. These chapters on hadith sciences are in fact introductory. It is interesting to note, especially in authentic traditions, when one starts studying and analyzing the style, a general impression that one gathers about the hadith is that the author and the personality is one, despite these traditions have reached us by word of mouth and in the form of written speech through different sources. It also shows that how carefully, diligently, and honestly this treasure has been preserved by the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and then passed down from generation to generation. Had it been not done with a meticulous care, it seemed there would have been as many authors as the transmitters of traditions. I have many debts of gratitude to acknowledge. First of all, to my teacher, the Sheikh Mahmud Ahmed, a renowned scholar, economist, and man of letters, who about 3 decades ago suggested this idea to me. Since then, I've kept it in my mind. 2 years ago, I actually took up the topic, and with the grace of Allah, have accomplished the task. I'm indebted to my nephew, Sheikh Tahir Qayyum, for his invaluable suggestions at certain places. I should also like to mention Mr. Muhammad Aslam, Secretary, National Book Foundation, and Mr. Abdul Hafiz Tawqir, Deputy Director, for their encouraging behavior, sense of promotion and knowledge, and cooperation in bringing out this work. I'm also grateful to Mr. Abdul Rahman, who took extra pains in typing and composing the manuscript, and my sons, Ubayd, Khalid, and Walid Khalid, for pointing out some type errors. May Allah Azza wa Jal reward them all for their efforts in this world and in the hereafter. Khalid Mahmood, Islamabad, 1st of January 2001. Let's get started with the prose of the book, the cons of the book, the notable quotes of the book, and the specific sins of the book. Number 1, clear and fluid, simple, easy writing style of the book. Number 2, the book is full of abundant examples. Number 3, is a unique section of content. Number 4, the book and the author has placed many points of criticism, critical research, critical writing style. Number 5, the author has clearly displayed his own independent scholastic personality. They say overseas, when you're doing your dissertation, when you're debating, or a book that you write, or a scholar of the past, they say, ظهرت فيه أو ظهرت في هذا الكتاب شخصية الإمام فلان. They said that the personality of this great scholar has become plain and clear in this book, meaning he showed himself not just as a student or a follower or a lackey or someone who's behind and tagging along with another scholar, but he himself is an independent scholar, a naqid, a criticizer, mujtahid. He is a writer, he's an author himself, and his shakhsiyya, his personality, is clear for everyone to see in this book or in this work. The next point of the prose of the book is the author has included several beneficial appendixes to min bab tatmim al-fa'idah, to complete the beneficial things that he put in the actual main body of the book. Number 7 is information that is available about the author. Many books that we have researched and studied and critiqued, we know nothing about the author, we know nothing about the translator, so that's a good thing. As far as the notable quotes, we'll do those before the cons of the book, then there are many. From them is that which is on page 27. The author, he says, the fact is that there are 3 main distinct periods of hadith collection, i.e. its preservation, its compilation, and its codification or their chapter-wise arrangement. They are often confused with each other, not only by Orientalists, but also by Muslim scholars. When preservation is confused with compilation and codification, and they are mixed up, there the trouble starts. The compilation and codification of traditions, no doubt, were carried out later in the last quarter of the 2nd and the 1st quarter of the 3rd centuries, respectively. But so far as the preservation of hadith is concerned, it had already been accomplished during the lifetime of the Prophet and his companions. Then we have one on page 33. He says, here the question may arise in the minds of the readers that what happened to earlier manuals and booklets that were in circulation during the 1st century. If the manuals disappeared and did not reach us, this does not mean that they have been lost, The fact is that the whole earlier written material was incorporated to the later major works of hadith. This is a critical point. And it's one of the main things that the Orientalists and their baby chicks, afrakhuhum, not a rooster, not a hen, but the little small, fuzzy, bushy baby chicks follow along behind them, from those who say that they're Muslim, those from Egypt, from Syria, from the Middle East, okay? Some of them who have left Islam and apostatized or left the fold of Islam. We call them their baby chicks. They follow the Orientalists. They say this. They say, what happened to the Musannaf of Fulan? What happened to the Jami' of this one? What happened to the Zuhd of this one? But yet and still we find a hadith inside of Bukhari with Waqi' or Ma'mar, or this one, Sa'id ibn Abi Aruba, so on and so forth. So what happened to them? The author says that they weren't lost, but they were incorporated in the Bukharis. They were incorporated in the Musnad Ahmad. They were incorporated in this book and that book. The author, he then says, thus these booklets were preserved forever. They were never lost. So just look at it like this now. If your father, if he wrote 50 poems or 50 letters, okay, and you heard about them, it's been well known that he wrote these books, he wrote these letters. But then later on, those letters haven't been separately published. But your uncle, he has a compilation of poems, of stories, of letters that he wrote. And in them, he quotes from his brother, your father. And he proves your uncle was never a liar. He was never a drunkard. He was never a womanizer. He was a trustworthy, upright, scholastic scholar. And he put what he got from your father, and when he traveled with your father, and the day when you were born, and what your father wrote, and so on and so forth. Would you say that the works of your father were lost, and they're made up and they're fabricated? Or would you say they have been incorporated in the works of your uncle with the authentic chain of narration? To the end of that very important and beneficial quote. Then there's one on page 37. We'll skip that for now. We have one on page 52. The author, he says, this challenge on onslaught of spurious traditions was met and combated by a well-equipped team of traditionalists. They worked all day and night to separate genuine hadith from the spurious and fabricated ones. As a result of it, ulum al-hadith, hadith sciences came into being to check and verify the isnad chain of transmitters and the metan, the text of hadith. Not just the chain, but the actual content as well. Different methods were adopted by the traditionalists to scrutinize and ascertain the authenticity of a report, etc. Then he says on page 53, in this same paragraph, a few lines down, it says, and care in collecting the information about the transmitters of traditions, that little scope and room is left for further investigation. And then he says in the last line of the paragraph, hadith, this criteria perfectly accords with modern scientific criticism. The modern means of scientific criticism don't clash with what the ulama of hadith did. Rather, the ulama of hadith, they were ahead of their time, they were advanced. Before there was a West, and before there was academia, and before there was a thing called a PhD or a dissertation or academic research as scholastic criticism. Then there are many other quotes. Perhaps we'll take one more. Let's say page 81. Author says, the impact of Quranic ideas and style on hadith. When we attempt to study and analyze the style of a great man, we can certainly take into consideration the factors that go to make up and contribute to his moral and intellectual growth and development. Besides, we have also to take into account the education he received, the teachers at whose feet he sat, and who helped him find himself, the influence which went to shape and mold his nature, the books he read, and the persons whom he met, and who have left an indelible mark and lasting impact on his life and personality. Crucially important point. When you take from someone, you learn from someone, what made him become what he became? Who changed him? When did he become enlightened, quote unquote, and how did he become enlightened? What was the major thing that happened in his life that made him leave off this and go to another place or another school of thought or another school of law or another ideology? What was impactful? What was influential? What education does he have? Etc. And there are many other notable quotes from the book. Now let's move on to the specific sins of the book. The first specific sin, or not the specific sin, the cons of the book, excuse me. The first con is typos in Arabic. And they're abundant. There are many of them. Number two, no vowels have been mentioned in the original Arabic text, which make it easier for the English reader to properly read the hadith and properly memorize the hadith, to read the verse from the Quran and memorize it and pass it on correctly. Number three is the inconsistency between quoting hadith in Arabic and not. Sometimes he quotes a hadith with no Arabic text, and many other places he quotes it with the original Arabic text. The next point is misquoted translation. Oftentimes the translation belongs to another hadith, another sentence, another ayah, and it's mixed up. After that, we have misquoted Quranic text in Arabic. Then we have poor takhrij, collected by Ahmed. What volume? What page? Collected by Bukhari. What number? What chapter? Nothing of that has been mentioned. Then we have inconsistent citation. Sometimes he quotes, sometimes he doesn't quote. Sometimes he references, other times he just says such and such said and Fulan said. And then we have abundant typos and grammatical errors in English. Not in Arabic, but in English. Everyone makes a mistake. Everybody, as the Arabs, they say, Inna likulli jawadin kabwa. This is every thoroughbred, every racehorse misses a gallop. That's human nature, to make a mistake. Jalla man la yashu, they say. How perfect is the one who never forgets. But to have 10, 20, 30, and an abundance, something is wrong with the author's original English, and something is wrong with the editor. And as is mentioned in the introduction and the preface, other people came behind him and picked out those errors. So something is seriously wrong when we still have a great amount of typos and grammatical errors after someone else, 2 or 3 people have looked at the book. Then we have quoting of several inauthentic hadiths. Hadiths which are not sahih, no clarification, no disclaimer. He considers the hadith to be sahih, just quoting it and leaving it open like that. Last but not least, the author is not a specialist in the field of hadith. And this, I would say, is one of the most consistent cons of the books that we have studied. Most of the people that write the books, they aren't specialists. He was educated in English and engineering. He was educated in rocket fuel. He was educated in astrophysics, but he wasn't educated in Islam or Arabic, let alone hadith. He's a master of the Quran. He's learned this qira'ah, but what about hadith science? Hadith science, Ahlu Makkata adra bishi'abiha. So those are the main cons of the book, and they're not that many, relatively speaking. As far as some of the specific sins of the book, then unfortunately there are many of them. And what I've marked down, there are more specific sins than there actually are notable quotes. One of them is on page 14. We're not going to take all of them, but just a few. It says here in Arabic, قال البخاري أخبرنا سليمان أبو رافع عن إسماعيل ابن جعفر عن نافع بن مالك عن أبي هريرة قال قال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم آية المنافق 3 إذا حدث كذب وإذا وعد أخلف وإذا اؤتمن خان. Who is Nafi ibn Malik narrating from Abu Hurairah? Okay, and he quotes the chain of narration without quoting it in the other places. Moving forward on page 15 as well, the next page, it says in this hadith or tradition, the chain of narration is Al-Bukhari said that Sulaiman informed him, saying that Ismail ibn Ja'far said that Malik informed him on the authority of his father that Abu Hurairah related the Rasulullah ﷺ saying. Something is seriously wrong. Then we have on page 16, it says categories were based on, it says main division of hadith. He breaks down into 3 categories. Number 1, the perfection or imperfection of the chain of the transmitters or their transmitters. Number 2, the freedom of the text from any defects. Number 3, acceptance of any hadith by the Sahaba and their followers, the Tabi'un and their successors, Tabi'in. And it's even wrong in the transliteration, Tabi'in. There's no Tabi', there's no alif lam and then mudaf. But the hadith being accepted by a companion or a narrator, where is this coming from that it is from the styles and the categories of a hadith being accepted and authentic, etc.? We can break down a hadith in its classification, how many chains it has, how many reporters in each chain, the level of authenticity, what type of hadith it is, etc. But this right there, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows. Then we have one, unfortunately, on page 17 as well. He says, ما رواه البخاري ومسلم قال حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد. That's a mistake. The Hamza wasl there. حدثنا جرير عن عمارة بن القعقاع عن أبي زرعة عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال جاء رجل إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا رسول الله من أحق الناس بحسن صحابتي. Did Bukhari and Muslim narrate with the exact same chain of narration, with the exact same person, word to word? Then we have on page 20, the author has 2 mistakes on one page. One, he says ad-da'if, the weak. This refers to the tradition or that tradition in which there is some problem in either the chain of transmission and the proper understanding of the transmitter or in its contents, which may be in disagreement with Islamic beliefs and practices. That's incorrect. There are many hadith which have weak chains of narration and the meaning is totally sound and correct. Rather, there are hadith which are fabricated and made up, which have not only correct meanings but beautiful meanings, and which the fabricators and great liars and storytellers would invent and create to get gold coins and silver shillings, gold guineas in their purses and their pockets. They would make up a beautiful hadith that everyone wants to hear, such as the hadith that says, when my believing slave calls upon me, Hadith Qudsi, it says, that Allah says, when my believing slave calls upon me, Allah says to the angels, don't answer his dua. Don't bring me his dua, because I love to hear his voice. I want to hear my slave continually calling upon me and asking me. And the narration it says, and when my wicked slave calls upon me, the kafir, the fajr, the munafiq, Allah says to the angels, give him what he wants immediately, because I hate to hear his voice. I don't want him calling upon me. That hadith is a very profound hadith, that Allah loves for the servant to call upon him, and that's one of the reasons why a dua may not be accepted. The hadith is not sahih. It's totally made up, totally fabricated. So that's not necessarily scientifically accurate. And then we have others on page 22. We have typos. Let's look on page 22. For example, he says ashadh, and he translated it as rare. A tradition coming from a single transmitter and contradicting another. If the transmitter is recognized authority, it deserves to be examined. Otherwise, the tradition is to be rejected. Well, which one is it? Because a shadh, based off of this definition, is, he says, coming from a single transmitter and contradicting another. Tell you, if the transmitter is recognized, then it's further investigated. What do you mean? Is it shadh or not? The thiqa, saduq, khalafa, tafarrada, shadda anhum. Is it considered, is it weak? Because he classified it as a type of weak hadith. So what's that further consideration if it's not weak? Tayyib. Moving forward, the next specific sin, and there are many of them, unfortunately. We have many of them throughout the book. Let's say, for example, page 110. All right, he says here in the English translation, know that the life of this world is only a frolic and mummery, and ornamentation, boasting and bragging among yourselves, and lust for multiplying wealth and children. It is like rain, so pleasing to the cultivator for his vegetation, which sprouts and swells, and then begins to wither. And you see it turn yellow and reduce to chaff. There is a severe punishment in the hereafter, but also forgiveness from God and acceptance. As for the life of this world, it is no more than merchandise of vanity. A few issues with that translation as well, which we really don't have the time to get into right now. Let's take one from page 110, if possible. Or not, that's another one. Let's say page 94. The author, he says, similarly, when it talks about resurrection, it says that to create a thing for the first time is a difficult task, but to repeat creation is an easier one. It also refers to daily happenings and natural phenomenon, and says that a dead soil, when it gets rain, comes to life all of a sudden. The same applies to a human life, that it never completely dies out, and it will be resurrected on the day of judgment. Once the Prophet was accompanied by his colleagues, passed by an elderly woman who was making a thread on a spinning wheel. The Prophet stopped for a moment and asked her if she believed in God. She retorted that if the spinning wheel could not operate with a man, how could this all universe be run and sustained without a creator? The Prophet was pleased to hear this argument and told his companions that they should have had the faith of an elderly woman. It doesn't say an N, it says elderly woman. Where is this from? Is this correct? Is this authentic? Would the Prophet tell his companions who learned to study with him to learn from this woman who was old and in most cases uneducated? In other words, she was on the fitrah. She was common sense to prove that there is a creator. How can this tremendous, stupendous word, a world that can't be described in a word in English or Arabic, how can it be ran and governed with no one in charge? Like this spinning wheel. So just because, or just how I'm manipulating the clay and making the pottery, someone has to move it and spin it and smooth it out. The same applies to the world. Excellent point. But where is this hadith? Where is this hadith collected? And did the companions say that they should have the iman of this ignorant old woman that's just on the fitrah? That's just on the fitrah. That's severely problematic. And there are many other specific sins in the book as well. At the end of the day, as we always say, when there are abundant mistakes or errors or things to be pointed out, it doesn't mean that the book is totally worthless. Nor does it mean that the worth is totally trash. And some brothers, they say, well, you were a little lax. You gave it this amount of quills with all these mistakes. Brother, akhi, ukhti, the book may be 300 pages, 500 pages, 300 pages, 200 pages, 100 pages. Those mistakes in comparison to the other pages and benefits doesn't mean that it's totally deserving of a very, very, very low grade. It doesn't mean that. Okay, it doesn't mean that. If an archer shoots 300 arrows and he misses 15 or 20 or 50, that's a very high percentage of accuracy. And only a few archers are that skilled to hit it each and every single time, let alone to continually get the bullseye. That's a rare talent. So we have to be just and fair and objective when we grade these books, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla for help for that. So with that being said, the author, bid'Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this work, we would give him bid'Allah. It's going to be a difficult one. I originally wrote how many calls I would give the author, but reading the book again and looking at some issues and aspects of the book, I decided to change my mind. So with that being said, and with Allah's all success, the author will receive 1, 2, and let's say 3 quills. 3 out of 5, inshallah, is fair. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. My original grade for the book was 2.5 quills, but I thought that was the author could at least get 3 quills in light of the benefit that is in the book. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Once more, Hadith in its literary style by Dr. Khalid Mahmoud Sheikh. Thank you very much for watching. Jazakumullahu khairan. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all guidance.